So we're going to be talking about the 8 signs that you might notice as you're healing from trauma. Because let's be honest, our wounds that we have from trauma, they're invisible, but we know we're there. If we're thinking about the healing process, like how do we know that we're healing? How do we know that it's happening? Because this is not a wound that we can see. It's not like surgery where we get to see the scab. We have a cast and we can take it off and maybe we do some physical therapy, but we know when we're healed, like we know when we're good. But how do we do that for our emotional wounds? That is all about trauma, processing triggers, and etc. What I want to offer are 8 ways that you might notice that you're healing from trauma, but not necessarily realizing it. And I say this, it's really important that we recognize when we're healing and how we're healing, because the journey to heal from trauma is so arduous that we really do need to take. And I would say some of these are not small wins. Some of these are huge victories. They are like huge pieces of celebration. But we have to be able to actually celebrate them. Part of that is bringing acknowledgement and bringing awareness into everything. One of the first ways that you might notice that you're healing from trauma is that you are feeling your emotions rather than minimizing. So yes, that might mean some tears. It might mean some anger. It might be some emotions that you have not felt in a really, really long time. But feeling those emotions and allowing them to come, it's such a good sign. It means that you're healing. It means that you're doing the work. Another way that you know that you're healing from trauma is that you are practicing living more mindfully rather than mindlessly. You are able to cultivate a little bit more awareness into your personal life, your personal energy, and maybe you're even asking yourself questions like, what does my body need right now? Do I even have the energy to commit to another mom's night out? Do I really want to embark on this project with this coworker? What would actually happen if I said no? And then the best thing is that maybe you even start checking in with yourself, like, hey, how am I doing today? And you become friends with yourself, right? And develop a really strong connective relationship with yourself. Another way that we know that we are healing from our trauma is that your body then begins to release that tension that the trauma was creating in the first place. And so whenever I was a yoga teacher, I used to always say, like, the issue is in your tissues. Like, we're going to work out the issues in your tissues, because our pain, literally, like by the time our body is speaking to us in pain, those are screams. By this point, like your body has been trying to tell you, has been whispering most likely for some time, unless it was like a break or something. Whenever we're healing, we begin to release tension. We start to feel better. We start to lose weight because we are no longer holding on to a lot of the same shit, literally and figuratively. But also too, is that you are going to be maybe more welcoming to touches, especially people who you're comfortable with, right? Like not necessarily strangers, because that might not ever change, but you maybe get more snuggly with your partner, or you're open to receiving hugs from your friends where perhaps you weren't. Another way that you know that you're healing from trauma is when you start to reach out for help rather than isolating. And this is a huge sign for me of someone who is emotionally mature, is someone who can recognize that they're not doing okay, but they don't get stuck there. As in they then go, okay, what are my resources? What can I use? Who do I need to call? Who is my support system? What is my support system? And then actually like going to do that thing. So whatever it is going to help them, that is a way to know that you are healing, when you are taking the steps that you need in order to heal yourself. So maybe that's you scheduling a session with your therapist. Maybe that's you scheduling a session with a somatic spiritual healer like me. Another way to know that you're healing from trauma is that you stop reacting less and you reflect more. And you're reacting less not only to other people, but also to yourself. And you start to speak kinder to yourself. You are aware of your triggers and your stressors, and you understand it to the point where they no longer control you. You understand what triggers you, that they're not constantly taking over you. You do have a method, you have some tools, and you have ways to work through that, and also to interrupt the self-sabotage cycle. Another way that you know you're healing from trauma is you begin to grieve for what you never had. And so part of this might have a little bit to do with that crying aspect, but this is really just an understanding that grief and that ability to acknowledge that we didn't have what we needed is something that can be so extremely healing. And whenever we can acknowledge that we didn't have what we needed, then we can, and after we've acknowledged that and taken the time to grieve, the beautiful thing is that we can start to then offer ourselves what it is that we didn't get, what it is that we still do need. And that way we can begin our own healing process and our own healing journey. Another way that you know that you have really begun to heal on your healing journey is that things in your life actually begin to shift. You realize that your trauma healing has extended outside of your healer's office, outside of your therapist's office, and you find yourself interacting differently in the world. You find yourself talking about things differently, experiencing things differently, and even reflecting on things differently. I always used to say this. I always like to use this analogy. Whenever I was a yoga teacher, I would always tell people, you know, that your yoga practice is really tuned in and settled in, or you've embodied your yoga practice is whenever you are taking whatever you're experiencing on your yoga mat. So that kindness, that compassion, that dedication, all of those values, and you're taking them off of your yoga mat and then you're extending them into your world. Like that is healing, right? Like that is healing. When you take whatever you have learned, those tools, those skills, that way to speak to yourself, and you're doing that outside of your healer's office and you're doing it on your own, that is healing. And that is powerful. And that's not something that you can see, right? So the other way is that you begin to recognize unhealthy relationship patterns. And here's the thing, not only do you recognize it, but you actually do the inner work to stop that cyclical pattern. Like this is one of the biggest benefits, I think, of spiritual healing is that you get to know yourself literally so fucking well. And yes, I cussed because I cuss. You get to know yourself so well that you get to know what it is that you want, what it is that you need, most importantly, what it is that you don't need and what you don't want. And then you stop attracting the same person in your life. You stop attracting the narcissist. You stop attracting the person who is never going to be able to give you what it is that you want because you've healed what it is that you're looking for in that person and you've healed it within yourself. That is healing. What's really important is to really think about your own healing journey and to note how far you've come. When I was in eating disorder treatment, a doctor that I worked with gave me this beautiful piece of advice that I love to offer to myself and whenever I need it, but also to my clients when they're going through things. Oftentimes we're on a healing journey, we're on a healing path, is that we are always looking how far we have to go. And there's something really beautiful about that is to know that we're not exactly where we want to be. But then my question is how can we celebrate the path that actually took us to get here? What this doctor told me is that instead of continually looking up to the mountain at how far you have left to go, what if instead you decided to look down? Everyone says, don't look down, don't look down. How do you know how far you've come? How do you know how high you've climbed? And how much you have done, the effort, the dedication, the time, the energy that you have put into your healing work. Yes, we can acknowledge that we have a place to go. We can acknowledge that we're not where we want to be. But we can also acknowledge that we are right here, right now, and we wouldn't be there if we hadn't taken that path to get us there. That's another way that we know that we're healing, is a deep, compassionate love for ourselves, for our journey. And then we can then extend all of that compassion and all of the things that we learn in our journey to other people. I am a trauma survivor. I have gone through my own personal hell of childhood trauma, of healing through childhood trauma, through over a decade of therapy, hypnotherapy. And it was not until I found somatic spiritual healing that I actually truly found healing. It did not cure my trauma. It did not erase my trauma. It did not take away the pain that I experienced, but it did validate my experience. It did teach me that I had areas of myself that I still needed healing. But most importantly is it taught me how I can access those selves and give them what it is that they need. So that way I no longer have to experience this, which means that if I'm not experiencing it, my children aren't experiencing it, which means that I have ended a cycle. And I have. Somatic spiritual healing, you get to end cycles within yourself, within your family, and within your whole lineage. That is power. That is healing. Again, my name is Adrina Alzadua. I'm a somatic spiritual healer. I love what I do. Thank you so much. And if you are interested in learning more about how to heal your trauma through somatic spiritual experiencing, please make sure that you are subscribing to my video where I'm posting weekly videos on the spiritual healing series on PTSD and spirituality. Thank you all so much. My name is Adrina Alzadua, somatic spiritual healer. Until next week, I'll see you guys. Take care and stay grounded.